Why would you give me your last money? Because tonight, somebody has to notice you.
Patricia Johnson stood outside a Toledo courtroom, clutching the order that could close her community kitchen forever. Then the door opened. A young judge stepped out, saw her, and froze. Without a word, he placed a glass box on the desk. Inside was an old $5 bill, folded into a tiny paper boat. "You told me a small boat could still carry somebody," he whispered. Patricia stopped breathing. 12 years earlier, she'd been a broke waitress with $5 left, and she had given it to a lost boy. Before we return to that rainy night, tell us your country and local time. And if stories like this matter to you, you're welcome to subscribe. 12 years earlier, at exactly 10:38 on a cold Tuesday night in November, rain rattled against the windows of Bell Street Diner like handfuls of dry rice thrown against glass. Patricia Johnson had been on her feet since 3 that afternoon. Her black waitress shoes pinched at both heels. The sole of the left one had separated twice that year, and Patricia had repaired it with hardware store glue because a new pair cost $43 she did not have. Every few hours she slipped into the employee restroom, pressed 2 fingers against the loose edge, and checked whether it was holding. So far it was. That was how Patricia measured good days then, by what had not fallen apart yet. Bell Street Diner sat 3 blocks from Toledo's bus station, squeezed between a pawn shop and a building whose upstairs windows had been boarded since spring. Truck drivers came for coffee before dawn. Factory workers ordered meatloaf after late shifts. People waiting for buses sometimes stretched 1 cup of coffee across 2 hours. Patricia knew most of them by habit rather than name. Extra lemon, no ice. Toast burned dark. Coffee filled only halfway because shaky hands spilled full cups. She noticed things. At 36, Patricia had learned that noticing was often the only kindness a person could afford. Her manager, Frank Miller, was counting the register behind the counter. 20 minutes, he called. "I want that back section done before 11. Patricia lifted one hand without turning. "I heard you. You said that yesterday. And somehow I still cleaned it." Frank frowned, but Patricia saw the corner of his mouth move. He was not cruel. He was a frightened man, with a manager's key ring and a constant fear that one complaint would reach the diner owner. When Frank became nervous, rules became more important than people. Patricia understood fear. She simply disliked what it made people ignore. She carried a gray plastic tub toward booth 4, and collected 2 coffee cups a plate streaked with ketchup and 78 cents in coins. 78 cents. Patricia slipped the tip into her apron. At home, inside a kitchen drawer, she kept a blue notebook. Every Sunday night, she sat at the table and wrote down every dollar. Rent, electric, bus, Emily. Her tips went into envelopes with the same words written across them in black marker. There was no envelope labeled Patricia. She had stopped finding that strange years ago. That afternoon, her 9-year-old daughter Emily had been lying beneath a faded yellow blanket when Patricia left for work. "I'm not sick," Emily had insisted. The thermometer had read 101.2. "You're absolutely sick. Maybe the thermometer is dramatic." Patricia had almost laughed. Mrs. Helen Parker from apartment 2B had agreed to check on Emily until Patricia returned. Patricia planned to stop at the 24-hour pharmacy after her shift and buy the cheapest generic fever medicine available. She had exactly $5 in cash. Before Patricia left, Emily had spotted the bill on the kitchen table. "Don't touch my medicine money. I wasn't touching it. You are literally touching it." Emily grinned and folded the bill once, then twice. Her small fingers worked quickly. When she finished, the $5 bill had become a crooked little boat. Emily. It still spends. Patricia picked it up. You folded Abraham Lincoln into transportation. A little boat can still carry somebody. Patricia had shaken her head and slipped the tiny boat into her apron. Now, nearly 8 hours later, she touched it through the fabric. Still there. Medicine. Home, sleep for 5 hours. Then another day. Patricia carried the dishes into the kitchen. When she returned, Frank was staring toward the back of the diner. Patricia. She followed his eyes. Booth 6. A boy sat alone beside the rain-covered window. Patricia stopped. He looked about 10. Maybe 11 if hunger had made him appear younger. His gray hoodie was soaked around the shoulders. Damp hair clung to his forehead. He wore no coat, though November wind had turned sharp after sunset. There was nothing on the table, no soda, no plate, no backpack. The boy's hands were hidden beneath the table. "How long has he been there?" Patricia asked. Frank shrugged. 10 minutes, maybe 20. You didn't see him come in. I was doing inventory. Patricia looked back at the boy. He was staring at the tabletop. Who ordered who? No. Frank lowered his voice. Tell him we're closing. Patricia glanced at the clock. We've got 50 minutes. You know what I mean. No, Frank. Explain it. Frank exhaled. Don't do this tonight. Do what? Make everything complicated. The boy looked toward the kitchen doors as a busboy carried plates of unfinished food past him. His eyes followed one plate, only for a second. Then he looked away. Frank leaned closer. Kids come in from the station. They sit around. Something goes missing. Then I get blamed. He's 10. You don't know that. Patricia looked at him. Frank, he's not secretly 40. Frank rubbed his forehead. Just ask him to leave. Patricia did not answer. She picked up a clean menu and walked towards booth 6. The boy noticed her immediately. His shoulders tightened. Patricia had seen that reaction before, not in children often, mostly in adults who expected bad news. She stopped beside the table, evening. The boy said nothing. Patricia placed the menu down, though she already knew he had no money. Then she noticed his shoes. Old blue sneakers. The right shoe had a white lace. The left had no lace at all. A thick rubber band was wrapped around it twice, holding the shoe against his foot. Patricia's fingers tightened around the menu. Her own repaired shoe suddenly felt different. Behind her, Frank cleared his throat. Patricia ignored him. She slid into the seat opposite the boy. His eyes immediately moved towards the front door. She kept both hands where he could see them. Honey Patricia said quietly, "Does anybody know where you are?" For the first time, the boy looked directly at her, and Patricia saw fear arrive before the lie did. The boy held Patricia's gaze for 3 seconds. Then he looked toward the rain-covered window. "My dad knows." Patricia did not move. "He coming to get you?" "Yeah. What time?" The boy shrugged. "Soon." Behind the counter, Frank Miller made a quiet sound in his throat. Patricia knew that sound. It meant he had already reached a conclusion. She had not. "What's your name?" she asked. "Daniel." "Daniel, what?" The boy hesitated. "Carter." "All right." "Daniel Carter, I'm Patricia." "I know." Patricia raised an eyebrow. Daniel pointed at the small plastic name tag pinned above her apron pocket. "Patricia." "Good," she said. "Means you can read. We've established something." Daniel almost smiled. "Almost." Patricia stood and walked to the counter. She filled a glass with warm water instead of ice water and grabbed 2 packets of crackers from the basket kept beside the soup station. Frank watched her. "Patricia, they're crackers. They cost money. So does the electricity you're using to glare at me. I'm serious. So am I." She carried the water and crackers back to booth 6. Daniel stared at them. "How much?" "The water. The crackers." Patricia sat down again. "Nothing." His hand remained beneath the table. "Nothing isn't a price." The words were too old for him. Patricia leaned back. "Fine. The price is you don't crush them into the carpet. I hate sweeping crackers." Daniel studied her face, searching for the trick. Then one hand appeared. His fingers were thin and red from cold. He opened the first packet carefully, not like a hungry child, like someone trying not to look hungry. Daniel broke the first cracker in half and ate one piece. He folded the empty corner of the wrapper beneath itself. Patricia watched him glance toward the kitchen again. A busboy passed, carrying a plate with half a hamburger and several untouched fries. Daniel's eyes followed it. He looked away before anyone could notice. Patricia noticed. "You hungry, nunno, Daniel?" I said no. Patricia nodded. "All right." That answer seemed to surprise him. Most adults, Daniel had learned to ask questions only when they had already chosen the answer they wanted. Patricia stood. She began wiping the table beside him. For nearly a minute, neither spoke. Then Daniel quietly said, "I'm used to it." Patricia stopped wiping, used to what Daniel's face hardened. Nothing. But Patricia had heard enough. She placed the rag down. "You said your father's coming." "He is." "Does he have a phone?" Daniel looked toward the door. "Probably. We can call him. He's driving. We can leave a message. He doesn't like messages." Patricia pulled out her order pad. "What's his number?" Daniel stood so quickly his knee struck the underside of the table. The water shook. "I gotta go." Frank looked up. Patricia did not touch Daniel. She simply stepped away from the aisle. The boy seemed confused. "You're not stopping me. Would you stay if I grabbed you?" "No, then grabbing you would be stupid." Daniel stared at her. Rain streamed down the glass behind him. "You can leave," Patricia said. "But before you do, I want you to look outside." He didn't, Daniel. Slowly he turned. The street beyond Bell Street Diner was nearly empty. Wind pushed rain beneath the yellow streetlights. "It's 38 degrees, Patricia said. "Your hoodie is wet. You don't have a coat. And unless your father is invisible, he's not outside." Daniel's jaw tightened. "My dad's coming." Patricia's voice remained soft. "Okay, he is." "Okay, stop saying that. Then tell me what you'd rather I say." Daniel's face changed. For a moment, he looked 10 again. "I don't know." Patricia sat back down. After several seconds, Daniel did too. Frank came near the booth. "Patricia, I need you. In a minute, now." She followed him toward the counter. Frank lowered his voice. "You cannot turn this into a social services office. He's a child. He could have run away." "Exactly. You don't know what he did." Patricia looked back at Daniel. "No," she said, "I don't." Frank crossed his arms. "And you were late twice this month." "The bus was late. The owner doesn't care why." Patricia understood the warning. Lose this job and the rent envelope stopped filling. So did electric. So did Emily. She touched the $5 boat through her apron. Medicine. Daniel was watching her. Patricia returned to booth 6. "I can call the after-hours child services number." Daniel's chair scraped violently against the floor. "No, Daniel. No," his breathing changed, fast, shallow. "They'll take me back." Back where he shook his head, South Avenue. Daniel froze. Patricia had guessed from the direction of the station. His silence confirmed enough. "What happened there?" "Nothing. Did somebody hurt you?" "No. Did somebody threaten you?" I said no. Frank moved toward them. Patricia raised one hand. Daniel grabbed the edge of his hoodie. "They were talking," he whispered. "Who the Foster people?" Patricia waited. "They thought I was asleep." Daniel swallowed. "They said they couldn't handle me anymore. Said my caseworker would probably move me tomorrow." His eyes remained on the table. "So I left first." Patricia felt something painful settle in her chest. "How many homes?" Daniel shrugged. "Daniel, 6. He was 10 years old. 6 homes." "I don't need them," he said. Patricia looked at his wet clothes, his rubber band shoe, and the crumbs he had saved in the cracker wrapper. "No," she said quietly. You look completely independent." Daniel glared at her. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed once. The sound disappeared almost immediately. Patricia reached for the diner phone. Daniel saw her. Panic returned. He bolted toward the door. "Daniel." He kept moving. Patricia reached into her apron. She did not grab him. She placed something on the table, the crooked $5 boat. Daniel stopped. His eyes dropped to it. "This is all the cash I have," Patricia said. Behind her, Frank went silent. Daniel turned slowly. "You can use it for food. You can use it to call somebody safe. But I need you to make me one promise. What don't disappear into that rain tonight." Daniel stared at the folded bill, then at Patricia. Why would you give me your last money? Patricia thought of Emily beneath the yellow blanket, the thermometer, the pharmacy, the medicine she still had to buy. She could have told Daniel everything. She didn't, because tonight, Patricia said, somebody has to notice you. For a long moment, Daniel Carter did not move. Then he walked back to booth 6, and slowly, carefully, he sat down. Daniel stared at the $5 boat as if it might open its paper mouth and tell him what Patricia wanted in return. He did not touch it. "You can take it," Patricia said. "No. You were about to walk into 38-degree rain." I said no. Patricia pulled the sugar container closer and began arranging the packets by color. Daniel frowned. "What are you doing, waiting?" "For what?" "For you to stop arguing with $5. His eyes narrowed. "You want something." Patricia looked up. "Excuse me, people don't give stuff for nothing." The certainty in his voice made her chest ache more than tears would have. Patricia leaned back. "My daughter folded that." Daniel glanced at the boat. "She made it. She believes paper has too much free time." Daniel almost smiled again. "Why, a boat?" Patricia picked up a pink sugar packet and placed it beside another. "Emily folds everything. Grocery receipts, homework corners, church programs. Last month, she folded my bus schedule into a bird and I missed the number 7. Daniel touched one pointed edge of the $5 boat. "What did she say about the boat?" He nodded. Patricia remembered Emily's fever-warm face and mischievous grin. A little boat can still carry somebody. Daniel looked skeptical. "That's dumb. She's 9. I'll tell her a 10-year-old philosopher disagrees." His fingers closed around the boat. Slowly, Daniel unfolded the bill. Abraham Lincoln's face emerged between deep creases. Daniel looked at the $5. Then, with surprising care, he folded it back. One crease. Another. Patricia watched the little boat return. Daniel placed it beside his water. "I'm not spending it. That defeats the purpose. I said I'm not." Before Patricia could answer, the bell over the front door rang. A truck driver in a brown jacket entered, ordered coffee to go, and left $2 on the counter. Patricia served him quickly. When she returned, she held a grilled cheese sandwich and a bowl of tomato soup. Daniel's eyes widened. "I don't have money, I know, then take it back." "No. You said the $5 new arrangement." Patricia placed a damp rag on the table. Daniel stared at it. What wiped the menus? He looked at the stack near the napkin holder. All of them. Every sticky fingerprint. Daniel looked at the sandwich, then at Patricia. "You're making me work for food I'm asking you to help me close." "Is that legal?" Patricia laughed. "Probably not the way you just described it." Daniel picked up the rag. He wiped the first menu carefully. Too carefully. Patricia turned away so he could take the first bite without feeling watched. By the time she returned from clearing booth, 3/2 the grilled cheese was gone. Daniel dipped the second half into the tomato soup. "Slow down," Patricia said. "I'm eating normal. You're eating like the sandwich insulted your mother." Daniel stopped. Patricia immediately saw the change in his face. "I'm sorry," she said. He stared into the soup. "My mom's dead." Patricia sat across from him. "I'm sorry." Daniel shrugged. She died when I was 6. He did not say overdose immediately. The word came later after 3 more menus. Overdose, he muttered. Patricia did not ask what drug. Children should not have to provide autopsy reports to earn compassion. Daniel told her pieces, not a complete story, a foster home with 2 large dogs. Another where the foster father locked the pantry after 8. A family who called him Danny even after he repeatedly said his name was Daniel. 6 placements. 6 different bedrooms. 6 versions of the phrase, "This can be your home." Daniel stopped wiping a menu. There was one lady, foster mother number case aide. He reached into the pocket of his hoodie and removed a wrinkled piece of paper. The paper had been folded so many times that the edges looked soft. A phone number was written in blue ink. Margaret Wilson. She remembered my birthday, Daniel said. Patricia looked at him. That matters. Daniel shrugged. Nobody who had been remembered would have asked that question. Can I call her? Daniel hesitated. What if she doesn't remember me now? Then we'll know. What if she does? Patricia pushed the diner phone toward him. Then we'll know that too. Daniel did not pick it up. Patricia dialed. The phone rang 4 times. A tired woman's voice answered. Hello, is this Margaret Wilson? Yes. My name is Patricia Johnson. I'm a waitress at Bell Street Diner. Daniel watched Patricia's face. I have a boy here named Daniel Carter. Silence. Then Margaret's voice changed. Daniel. He looked down. Yes, ma'am, Patricia said. Is he safe? He's inside. He's eaten. Please don't let him leave. Daniel stiffened. Patricia held up one finger. Margaret continued. I worked his case 2 years ago. I've been trying to get updated access, but I'm no longer assigned. Please, Patricia. I'm 25 minutes away. Patricia looked at Daniel. I won't hold him here, I understand. But I'll try to keep him talking. That's enough. Patricia hung up. At 11:16, the diner phone rang again. Frank answered. Patricia, it's your neighbor. Her stomach tightened. Mrs. Helen Parker's voice was worried. Emily's fever is higher. 102.4. Patricia closed her eyes. Is she awake? Yes. Is she drinking water? A little. I'll be home soon. Patricia hung up. Frank had heard enough. Go, he said. Patricia looked toward booth 6. Daniel was watching. Margaret isn't here. I'll stay, Frank said. Patricia knew Frank. She also knew closing time. At 11:30, fear of the owner would become stronger than Frank's promise. I'll wait, Patricia. Your kid is sick, I know. Those 2 words nearly broke her. At 11:47, headlights swept across the diner windows. A silver sedan stopped outside. A woman in her late 50s hurried through the rain. Daniel stood. Margaret. The woman froze. Oh, Daniel. She did not run to hug him. She waited. Daniel crossed the distance himself. Only then did Margaret place her arms around him. Patricia grabbed her coat. She ran 3 blocks toward the bus stop. The red taillights of the final bus disappeared at the intersection. Patricia stopped beneath the rain. Then she began the nearly 3-mile walk home. From the diner window, Daniel watched her go. He looked down at the $5 boat in his hand. For the first time in his young life, someone had lost something because of him, and had not made him feel guilty for it. The rain followed Patricia for almost 3 miles. By midnight, water had soaked through the shoulders of her coat and reached the thin blouse beneath. Her repaired left shoe made a soft sucking sound with every step. The glue had finally surrendered. Patricia kept walking. At the corner of Monroe Street, she saw the green light of a 24-hour pharmacy. Emily. Patricia pushed through the automatic doors and went directly to the children's medicine aisle. She found the generic fever reducer she had checked the price of 2 days earlier, $4.79. She reached into her apron. Coins! 78 cents from booth 4, 2 quarters, 3 dimes, a few pennies. Patricia counted twice. Then she remembered the small paper boat sitting in Daniel Carter's hands. The cashier watched Patricia place the medicine on the counter. Anything else, Nupper? The total appeared. Patricia emptied her coins beside the register. The cashier counted them. You're short, I know. Patricia looked at the bottle. How short? $2.61. For one dangerous second, Patricia considered asking the cashier to let her take it. She imagined Emily beneath the yellow blanket. Then Patricia looked at the young cashier's tired face and the security camera above the register. The girl could lose her job. Patricia picked up the bottle. It's okay, she returned it to the shelf herself. At 12:41 a.m., Patricia reached her apartment building. Mrs. Helen Parker opened the door before Patricia could knock. Lord, Patricia, you're soaked. How is she sleeping? Patricia stepped inside. Emily lay curled on the sofa, one hand beneath her cheek. Her hair was damp from the cool cloth Helen had placed across her forehead. Patricia knelt. She touched Emily's face. Too warm. Mom, I'm here. You're late. I know, baby. Emily opened one eye. Did the bus break? Patricia looked at her wet clothes. Something like that. Helen brought another bowl of cool water. Together, they changed the cloth and encouraged Emily to drink. Patricia stayed awake all night. At 5:12 in the morning, Emily's temperature finally dropped below 102. Patricia sat on the kitchen floor. She was too tired to stand. Helen found her there. You need money for medicine. Patricia hated the question. Not because Helen had asked it, because the answer was yes. I get paid Friday, Patricia. $8. Patricia whispered, I'll give it back Friday. Helen disappeared into her apartment and returned with a $10 bill. Patricia took 8 and handed 2 back. Helen sighed. You count pride like it's money. I count everything. At 7, Patricia walked to the pharmacy. This time she bought the medicine. When she returned, she opened her blue notebook. November 18th, she wrote one line. Borrowed $8. Emily medicine. Patricia underlined it once. Emily appeared in the kitchen doorway wrapped in her yellow blanket. Where's my boat? Patricia stopped writing. What boat? My $5 boat. It was my $5. I did the folding. Patricia smiled. Then Emily noticed her mother's expression. You spent it. Not exactly. Patricia closed the notebook. There was a boy at the diner. Emily climbed onto a chair. Patricia told her only what a 9-year-old needed to know. A boy had been alone. He was cold. He needed help finding someone safe. So you gave him the boat. Yes, Emily thought about this. Did it carry him? Patricia looked toward the rain-streaked window. I hope it got him to morning. Across Toledo, Daniel Carter woke on Margaret Wilson's sofa. The $5 boat was beneath his pillow. Margaret had spent most of the night making phone calls. By noon, she had learned that Daniel's foster placement had received 3 previous complaints. None had resulted in immediate removal. Margaret refused to send him back without review. She called supervisors, then supervisors of supervisors. She documented every conversation. Daniel watched from the kitchen table. You're gonna get in trouble, he said. Probably, then stop. Margaret looked at him. No. Daniel did not know what to do with adults who accepted consequences voluntarily. Within 3 days, Daniel was moved to another placement. It was not perfect, but the pantry was not locked. No one threatened to send him away during arguments. Margaret visited every week. Daniel placed the $5 boat inside a small tin box that had once held peppermint candies. He never saw Patricia again. Not because he forgot her. Life simply moved. 2 years later, Bell Street Diner closed. Patricia arrived for her afternoon shift and found a typed notice taped to the glass. Permanently closed. Frank stood in the parking lot holding his manager's keys. "He didn't even call," he said. Patricia looked at the envelopes in her mind. Rent, electric, Emily. The next morning she applied for 6 jobs. She became a laundry attendant during the day and prepared vegetables in a cafeteria 4 evenings a week. Emily grew taller. The yellow blanket disappeared into a closet. Patricia's blue notebook filled with new debts and crossed-out debts. On Sundays, Patricia cooked. It began with Mrs. Helen Parker. Helen's arthritis worsened, so Patricia carried upstairs a bowl of chicken soup. The next Sunday, she made extra. A neighbor who had lost his warehouse job received a bowl. Then a mother in apartment 3C whose electricity had been disconnected. Patricia. "I can't pay you," the woman said. Patricia placed the container in her hands. "There's enough in the pot." The following Sunday, someone donated potatoes. Another person brought onions. Helen sat at Patricia's table peeling carrots with painful fingers. Emily labeled containers. 1 pot became 2, 2 became 4. Years passed. People moved away. New people arrived. But on Sundays, the smell of soup continued drifting through Patricia's apartment building. And somewhere across Toledo, inside a peppermint tin, a $5 paper boat waited quietly. Neither Patricia nor Daniel understood it yet. But one small act had already begun carrying more than one person. Daniel Carter did not become a judge because one waitress gave him $5. Life was never that simple. At 13, Daniel punched a boy in the school cafeteria after the boy called him charity inventory. The other boy needed 3 stitches. Daniel received a 10-day suspension. At 14, he stole a pair of headphones from a convenience store. Margaret Wilson found them beneath his mattress. She placed the headphones on the kitchen table. "Put your shoes on." Daniel stared at her. "Why, we're going back." "No." Margaret picked up her car keys. "You can walk into that store beside me or 10 steps behind me. Those are your choices." Daniel hated her that afternoon. He returned the headphones. He apologized without looking at the cashier. Margaret did not congratulate him afterward. She bought him a hamburger and asked whether he had math homework. That was Margaret's way. She refused to turn Daniel's mistakes into his identity. By 16, Daniel had been living with Margaret for nearly 4 years. She had become his legal guardian after months of paperwork, home inspections, and arguments with people who believed a woman approaching 60 should not take responsibility for a troubled teenager. Daniel still expected permanence to disappear. He kept a packed backpack beneath his bed. Margaret knew. She never mentioned it. One February morning, Daniel was suspended again after another fight. This time, the principal told him one more serious incident could prevent him from graduating on schedule. Daniel came home, dropped his backpack beside the couch, and said, "I'm done." Margaret looked up from a stack of utility bills. "With what school?" "No." Daniel laughed bitterly. "You don't get to decide. Unfortunately for you, I filled out 47 pages to become your guardian. I intend to enjoy the authority. What's a diploma going to do?" Margaret became quiet. Daniel paced across the kitchen. "People see my file before they see me. Foster kid, behavioral issues. 6 placements. That's what I am." Margaret did not answer immediately. Daniel hated silence when he was angry. It gave his own words time to return. He stormed into his bedroom and slammed the door. For 20 minutes he sat on the floor. Then he reached beneath his bed. The old peppermint tin was still there. Daniel opened it. Inside lay the $5 bill folded into a small paper boat. The edges had softened. One corner was slightly bent. Daniel held it between his fingers. He remembered Bell Street Diner. Warm water, crackers, tomato soup, Patricia Johnson sitting across from him without grabbing his arm when he tried to leave. For years, Daniel had remembered one detail incorrectly. He had convinced himself Patricia's first question was about what he had done. It wasn't. "Honey, does anybody know where you are?" Later, she had looked at his wet hoodie and asked if he was cold. She had noticed the boy before, demanding the explanation. Daniel stared at the paper boat. The next morning, he went back to school. He did not suddenly become a perfect student. He failed algebra once. He argued with teachers. He spent 3 months on academic probation. But he stayed. After graduation, Daniel worked evenings at a grocery store and enrolled at Owens Community College. Margaret attended his first day as if he were entering Harvard. "You're embarrassing me," Daniel said. "Good. Builds character." 2 years later, Margaret received a notice from her landlord. The document was 6 pages long. Daniel found her at the kitchen table with 3 different envelopes open. "What is it? Nothing." He picked up the notice. The landlord claimed Margaret had failed to respond to a lease compliance request. "When did you get the first notice?" "I don't know." "Margaret." She rubbed her forehead. "I thought it was informational. It wasn't. A response deadline had passed." The landlord was threatening further action. Daniel read the document 3 times and understood almost none of it. That frightened him. Margaret had worked inside the foster care system. She knew how to document calls and challenge supervisors, but one page filled with legal language had made her helpless. Daniel accompanied her to a legal aid office. A volunteer named Robert Hayes reviewed the notice. "You haven't lost anything yet," Robert said. Margaret looked stunned. "But the deadline, there's another process." Robert showed them the appeal language buried on page 5. Daniel leaned closer. Why doesn't the notice just say that Robert smiled without humor? Because systems aren't always written for the people most affected by them. That sentence stayed with Daniel. Margaret kept her apartment. Daniel changed his college major. He became interested in public administration, then law. He began noticing a pattern everywhere. People did not always lose because they were wrong. Sometimes they lost because they missed a date, used the wrong form, entered the wrong room, could not afford someone to explain a paragraph. Daniel transferred to the University of Toledo. He worked grocery shifts, campus security weekends, and one miserable summer unloading trucks before sunrise. The $5 boat remained on his desk. During law school, Daniel placed it beside his textbook as books. On nights when he wanted to quit, he looked at it. A little boat can still carry somebody. Daniel graduated. He spent his first years working in municipal legal services, handling housing disputes, administrative appeals, and hardship cases. He became known for asking one question before reviewing penalties. Did they understand the notice? Some colleagues found the question unnecessary. Daniel did not. At 32, he was appointed to a pilot administrative court program in Toledo. On his first week, Daniel sat in his new office reviewing the docket. Case 43A, Case 44C, Case 47B. He stopped. Applicant Patricia Johnson. Daniel read the address, Bell Street. His hand slowly moved toward the glass box on his desk. Years earlier, Margaret had paid to have the fragile paper boat protected inside it. Daniel opened the case file. Bell Street Community Kitchen. Emergency closure petition. He looked again at the name. Patricia Johnson. The waitress had disappeared from his life 12 years earlier. Bell Street Diner had closed. He had searched old directories and social media more than once, but Patricia Johnson was a common name. Now her name was sitting on his docket. Daniel lifted the glass box. The $5 boat rested inside. "It can't be her," he whispered. Then he turned the page. A scanned identification photograph appeared in the file. Daniel stopped breathing. The woman was older. There were silver strands near her temples, but he knew those eyes. Daniel looked from Patricia's photograph to the paper boat. 12 years after Booth 6, the woman who had noticed him was about to walk into his courtroom. And Daniel Carter suddenly understood that the hardest decision of his career had arrived before his first month on the bench was over. By the time Patricia Johnson turned 48, Sunday Soup had outgrown every pot she owned. Her apartment kitchen could no longer hold the people who arrived carrying potatoes, canned tomatoes, bags of rice, or nothing at all. Patricia never asked which category they belonged to. If someone came with onions, she found them a knife. If someone came hungry, she found them a bowl. There's enough in the pot, she still said. Emily had heard the sentence so many times that she sometimes mouthed the words before her mother finished. The opportunity to build something larger came from an abandoned laundromat on Bell Street. Its windows were cloudy. 3 broken washing machines remained bolted to the floor. The back room smelled like rust and old detergent. Patricia stood in the middle of it one afternoon with Helen Parker and Emily. Emily looked around. "This place is terrible." Patricia nodded. "Rent's cheap." "That is not the same sentence as this is good." Helen tapped the wall with her cane. "Paint it yellow." Patricia smiled. That was how Bell Street Community Kitchen began. Not with a wealthy donor, not with a television camera. With 12 neighbors' borrowed tools and Patricia standing on a folding chair trying to remove an old laundry prices sign. George Bennett, a retired mechanic, repaired a sink. Rachel Moore painted walls while her 2 children did homework in the corner. Kevin Harris, a delivery driver, found a restaurant replacing its metal prep tables and convinced the owner to donate too. Emily created spreadsheets. Patricia distrusted spreadsheets. "I have a notebook." "Mom, your notebook has soup on page 17. That means page 17 has experience." Still, Patricia studied. She learned Ohio food safety requirements. She completed certification courses after work. She memorized storage temperatures and cleaning procedures. The first time she passed a formal inspection, Patricia bought herself a coffee that cost $3.40. She wrote the amount in her blue notebook. Then she circled it, a celebration. Above the kitchen counter, Emily painted 6 words. Pay what you can. Work if you can. People who could pay did. People who could not were never placed in a separate line. If someone wanted to contribute, Patricia found work. Fold napkins, stack cans, wipe tables, deliver soup to Helen and other elderly residents. "You don't have to explain your life to eat dinner," Patricia told every volunteer. "And nobody here earns humiliation." Within 4 years, Bell Street Community Kitchen was serving more than 60 families each week. Emily, now 21 and studying nursing, managed volunteer schedules between classes and part-time shifts. Patricia still cooked, still counted every dollar, still wore practical black shoes. Then Westbridge Development Group bought the block. The announcement arrived in a glossy envelope. Revitalizing Bell Street for Toledo's future. Patricia read it twice. "What does revitalizing mean?" George asked. Emily looked through the window at 3 black SUVs parked across the street. Usually, somebody thinks we're in the way. The first notice arrived 11 days later. Ventilation violation. Patricia did not argue. She called Thomas Reed, the municipal inspector listed on the form. What exactly needs fixing? Oh, Thomas sounded surprised. Most people start by yelling. I can yell after I understand the problem. Thomas visited the next morning. He was a thin man in his 50s who carried a clipboard like it was part of his skeleton. He pointed to the exhaust system. "This section isn't moving enough air. Dangerous not immediately, but it's below requirement." Patricia wrote everything down. 3 weeks later, George repaired part of the system. Then came a signage violation. Then a storage notice. Then questions about occupancy. Some problems were real. Patricia corrected them. She moved canned goods 6 inches higher, replaced a damaged shelf, changed a sign, but other notices confused her. One letter claimed she had failed to request re-inspection by October 14th. Patricia opened her notebook. I called October 10th. Thomas checked his tablet. System says the request came in October 17th. I wrote down the confirmation number. She showed him. Thomas frowned. That is our confirmation format. So why does your system say the 17th? I don't know. Patricia began keeping copies of everything. Then Westbridge requested a meeting. 2 representatives arrived wearing expensive coats. They sat at one of Patricia's tables and placed a folder in front of her. The relocation offer was $18,000. Patricia stared at the number. $18,000 could change her personal life. She could pay old debts, replace her car, maybe help Emily reduce her student loans. What happens to the kitchen? Patricia asked. One representative smiled politely. The current facility would cease operations. And the families, this offer concerns your tenancy, Miss Johnson. Patricia closed the folder. Then you're offering the wrong person money. The representative's smile disappeared. We encourage you to consider the risk of ongoing compliance costs. Patricia pushed the folder back. No. A week later, an emergency closure petition was filed. Patricia found the notice taped to the kitchen door at 6:14 Monday morning. She read every line, accumulated violations, public safety concerns, immediate administrative review. Emily arrived 20 minutes later and found her mother standing beside the refrigerator. Patricia taped the notice to its metal door. Mom. Patricia opened her blue notebook. Her hands were shaking. Emily noticed. Patricia did too. For several seconds she stared at the pages where she had once counted bus fare and medicine money. She had learned food regulations, certification requirements, inventory systems, volunteer schedules. Now a new language had arrived. Administrative hearings, emergency petitions, appeal deadlines. Patricia picked up a pen. Then I guess I learned the next thing. Outside, the Westbridge vehicle moved slowly past the kitchen. Inside, Patricia wrote 3 words across a clean notebook page. How do I fight? She did not yet know that across Toledo, a young judge was holding an old $5 paper boat and asking himself an equally difficult question. Patricia Johnson discovered that the law had its own weather. Some mornings it arrived as a thin white envelope. Other days it came by certified mail and demanded a signature. Sometimes it appeared on a computer screen at 1:17 in the morning, hidden behind a link labeled Municipal Code, Section 1137.08. Patricia learned to read all of it. Her blue notebook changed. Pages once filled with grocery totals and soup ingredients now carried columns. Inspection date, response deadline, fee, appeal window. She wrote every confirmation number twice. Emily scanned every notice. Cloud backup, Emily explained. Patricia looked toward the ceiling. The cloud has my paperwork, not that cloud, Mom. Then people need better names for things. The printer at Bell Street Community Kitchen became their enemy. It jammed every 3rd day. Patricia learned to open the back panel, remove the cartridge, and pull paper from the rollers without tearing it. Westbridge Development Group had attorneys. Patricia had a canvas bag, a blue notebook, and a printer that required emotional support. Still, she worked. Thomas Reed returned for another inspection on a Thursday morning. Patricia followed him with her notebook. Storage shelf corrected, exit access clear, ventilation. Thomas looked at the repaired system. Improved. Final reinspection needed. I requested that October 10th. Thomas stopped. We discussed this, and I brought the confirmation number again. Patricia showed him. Thomas entered the number into his tablet. His forehead tightened. The request exists. Good. But it was processed October 17th. That's not when I submitted it. I know. Patricia studied his face. Does that happen often? Thomas lowered the tablet. I didn't say it happened. You also didn't say it didn't. Miss Johnson, I inspect buildings. And I serve soup. Yet here we both are discussing computer dates. Thomas almost smiled. Almost. I'll note the discrepancy. Will that remove the late penalty? I don't control penalties. Who does Thomas gave her the department number? Patricia wrote it down. The legal aid office occupied the second floor of a downtown building with an elevator that smelled like burnt dust. Patricia arrived at 7:45 a.m. There were already 17 people waiting. At 10:20, she finally spoke with an intake worker. The woman reviewed Patricia's papers. This is an administrative closure matter. I know. We have a housing backlog and only 2 attorneys handling municipal compliance cases. When can someone see me? The woman looked apologetic. Possibly 6 weeks. My hearing is in 12 days. Silence. Patricia gathered her documents. Thank you. Miss Johnson, I can give you a procedural information packet. Patricia took it. It was 43 pages. She read 12 pages on the bus home. The kitchen's ventilation repair estimate was $3,800. Patricia did not have $3,800. In the storage room stood an industrial mixer donated 2 years earlier. They rarely used it because most meals were soup casseroles and rice dishes. A bakery owner offered $1,450. Emily objected. We might need it. We need the ventilation now. You love that mixer. I love passing inspection more. Patricia sold it. The money went directly toward repairs. 3 days later, Westbridge filed an emergency closure request anyway. The notice arrived at 4:52 p.m. Patricia read it standing beside the empty space where the mixer had been. She did not cry. She called the clerk. What form do I file to respond? The clerk gave her a number. Patricia wrote it down. What is the deadline? 5 business days. She wrote that down too. The hearing was scheduled for Monday. Toledo Municipal Administrative Court. Case 47B. Patricia arrived carrying her canvas bag. She wore her navy coat and the best blouse she owned. Emily had offered to come. No, Patricia said. You have clinicals. Mom, I raised you to become a nurse, not my personal courthouse bodyguard. Patricia entered alone. She passed through security. On the 3rd floor, she found hearing room 3. A young judge entered through a side door. Patricia glanced at him. Something about his face seemed familiar. But 12 years had changed Daniel Carter. The thin, frightened boy had become a tall man in a dark judicial robe. Daniel recognized Patricia immediately. Her hair contained silver now. There were deeper lines beside her mouth, but the eyes were the same. The woman from booth 6. Daniel sat behind the bench. His hands felt cold. The clerk called the case. Bell Street Community Kitchen Administrative Matter 47B. Patricia stepped forward. Daniel looked at the file, then at her. He had spent the weekend reviewing judicial ethics rules. There was no acceptable alternative. Miss Johnson, Daniel began. Patricia looked up. Daniel's throat tightened. I need to disclose a prior personal connection to the petitioner. The Westbridge attorney immediately raised his head. Patricia frowned. Daniel continued. Because of that connection, I am recusing myself from this matter. Patricia stared at him. Recusing. The word was in her 43-page packet. She knew what it meant. You won't hear the case, she asked. Daniel could not explain. Not here. No, Miss Johnson. Patricia looked at the judge's nameplate. On Daniel Carter. Then she remembered. Rain. Booth 6. A rubber band around a child's shoe, the $5 boat. Her face changed. Daniel saw recognition arrive. For 1 second, neither of them was in a courtroom. Then Daniel stuttered. "The case will be reassigned." He left through the side door. Patricia remained at the table. She had not expected favoritism. She had not wanted a debt repaid. But some small, tired part of her had believed the boy she once noticed might at least listen. Instead, Daniel Carter had looked directly at her and walked away. Patricia did not speak until she reached the courthouse steps. Rain had begun again. Not the hard November rain she remembered from 12 years earlier. This was lighter, almost mist, settling across the stone steps and darkening the shoulders of her navy coat. Emily was waiting beside the curb. "You skipped clinicals. I rearranged clinicals." That's a fancy way of saying skipped. Emily took one look at her mother's face. "What happened?" Patricia tightened her grip on the canvas bag. The judge removed himself. "What? He knew me?" Emily stared. Then understanding struck. Patricia nodded. "The boy from the diner. The boy is a judge now." Emily's mouth opened. For a second, amazement replaced everything else. Then anger arrived, and he walked away. He recused himself. That's the polite legal word for walked away. "Emily, no mom. You gave him your last $5. Patricia stopped. People moved around them, opening umbrellas and hurrying towards parked cars. "Lower your voice. Why?" "Because that $5 does not own him." Emily stared at her mother. Patricia's voice softened. "I didn't buy 12 years of Daniel Carter's life for $5. But he could help. Maybe he can't. He's a judge." "Exactly." Emily pulled out her phone. "What are you doing looking him up?" Patricia took the phone from her hand. "Mom. No reporters, no social media, no story about the poor waitress who helped the lost boy who became a judge. Why not? Because if he wears that robe, let him protect what it means." Emily fell silent. Across the courthouse, Daniel Carter sat alone in his office. The glass box rested on his desk. He had imagined finding Patricia Johnson hundreds of times. In some versions, he thanked her. In others, he handed her the $5, and they laughed. He had never imagined recusing himself from her case while a corporate attorney watched. Daniel opened the ethics manual again. The answer had not changed. A significant prior personal connection could create an appearance of bias. Westbridge's attorneys would discover the connection eventually. If Daniel ruled for Patricia, they could challenge the decision. Patricia might win one hearing and lose everything on appeal. Daniel pressed his fingers against his forehead. He could not advise her. He could not call her. He could not tell her which arguments to make. But before recusing, Daniel had reviewed Case 47B. Something had bothered him. The dates. Patricia's reinspection request showed one submission date and another processing date. Daniel opened the docket system. He searched the surrounding case numbers. 46A. A barber shop on Bell Street. Similar delay. 48C. A small grocery. Another late processing entry. Daniel searched further. 5 businesses, then 9. All located within the Westbridge redevelopment zone. Daniel leaned back. A pattern was not proof, but it was enough for a procedural question. He contacted the administrative court director. "I need to report possible docket irregularities. In your recused case, not one case, a batch." Daniel requested an audit of emergency closure petitions filed within the redevelopment block. He included Case 47B, but he did not highlight Patricia's name. If the system had failed, it needed examination for everyone. 3 days later, Patricia received a reassignment notice. Attention Susan Whitmore. Emily searched the judge's record. She has denied 41% of emergency appeals. Stop researching statistics. She has a reputation for being strict, Good. Emily looked up. Good if I win, nobody can say she felt sorry for me. Bell Street Community Kitchen closed temporarily the following Friday. Patricia arrived before sunrise. She unplugged the refrigerator. George stacked chairs upside down on tables. Rachel removed food from the freezer. Kevin loaded boxes into his delivery van and transported them to a church pantry. Nobody talked much. At 9:22, Patricia locked the front door. The silence inside surprised her. No spoons against bowls. No children arguing over napkins. No Helen Parker telling George he cut carrots too thick. Patricia walked to the counter. She sat down. For 12 years, she had survived by learning the next thing. Bus routes, laundry machines, food certification, inventory. But this felt different. "I know how to feed people," she whispered. Emily stood in the doorway. Patricia had not heard her enter. "I don't know how to fight lawyers." Emily crossed the room. For the first time in years, Patricia looked small to her daughter. Not weak, tired. There was a difference. Emily placed the canvas bag on the table. "Then we learn." Patricia looked at her. Emily opened the bag. Notices spilled across the table, inspection reports, receipts, emails, confirmation pages. Patricia stared at the mess. "What exactly are we learning?" Emily picked up a yellow highlighter. Everything. They worked until midnight. The next morning, Patricia called every volunteer. She did not ask for money. She asked one question. "Did you keep anything, receipts? Photographs, delivery records, calendars, anything with a date?" By Sunday afternoon, people began returning to the closed kitchen. George arrived first carrying a metal toolbox and an old envelope. Rachel came 20 minutes later with her phone. Kevin parked his delivery van outside. One by one, the people Patricia had once noticed began walking through the door. Each carried something small. Patricia stood behind the counter watching documents collect on the table. She did not know whether any single piece could save Bell Street Community Kitchen. Then Emily placed a receipt beside an inspection notice. "Mom, what the dates don't match." Patricia moved closer. Emily pointed again, and for the first time since Daniel Carter walked away from the bench, Patricia felt something other than fear. She felt a question forming. By Monday morning, the tables inside Bell Street Community Kitchen no longer held soup bowls. They held evidence. Patricia stood at the center of the room with her blue notebook open, while Emily arranged documents into separate piles. Yellow tabs marked inspections. Blue tabs marked repairs. Green tabs marked deliveries. Red tabs marked Westbridge notices. Patricia watched her daughter work. "You bought 4 colors of tab 6. How much?" Emily stopped. "Mom, how much?" $7.89. Patricia wrote the amount in her notebook. Emily stared at her. "You're documenting my office supplies. Every dollar has a job. I'm 21, and apparently spending $7.89 on tiny pieces of colored paper." George Bennett laughed from the next table. For a moment, the kitchen sounded normal again. Then Emily placed 2 papers side by side. "Look." One was the receipt from the company that repaired the exhaust fan. The date was October 8th. The second was a municipal notice stating that the ventilation issue remained uncorrected as of October 12th. That's 4 days later, Patricia said. "Keep reading." The notice claimed no repair documentation had been submitted. George opened his old envelope. "I gave Thomas a copy when he came. You're sure I remember because my printer was running out of ink." Half the receipt looked purple. Emily enlarged a photograph on Rachel Moore's phone. In the background, behind 3 volunteers carrying soup containers, Thomas Reed stood beside the repaired exhaust system. The timestamp read October 11th, said 9:42 a.m. Patricia leaned closer. He saw it. "That's not proof he approved it," Emily said. No. Patricia had learned to stop asking evidence to say more than it actually said, but it proves the system's timeline is incomplete. Kevin Harris arrived after his morning delivery route. He carried a printed report from his company's GPS system. "You said you needed dates." Patricia nodded. Kevin pointed to a line. "October 14th, I delivered canned beans at 8:16. Patricia remembered that morning. Thomas had arrived shortly afterward. The municipal record claimed the inspection occurred at 7:30. "That can't be right," Kevin said. "I was blocking the loading entrance at 8:16. Inspector showed up after me and complained about my van." Emily placed the GPS report beside the inspection record. Another mismatch. The pieces were small, painfully small. No dramatic confession, no secret recording. Just dates, receipts, photographs. A delivery truck's GPS log. Patricia felt discouraged. What if this isn't enough? Emily looked around the room. It doesn't have to be one big thing. What does that mean Emily picked up a receipt? They're little boats. Patricia stared at her. Emily smiled. A little boat can still carry somebody. For 12 years, Patricia had repeated the phrase without thinking about where it began. Now she laughed softly. "All right." She pulled the notebook closer. "Let's build a fleet." For the next 3 nights, Patricia studied municipal code. She read aloud because legal language made more sense when she heard it. "Failure to comply within designated remedial period may constitute George looked up from repairing a cabinet hinge." English. I'll tell you when I find some. At 1:13 Tuesday morning, Patricia discovered the difference between a violation date and a processing date. At 2:04, she learned what an administrative record included. At 2:37, Emily took the laptop away. "You have to sleep. I have 14 pages left. You've read the same sentence 4 times. It might improve. It won't." Thomas Reed received a subpoena on Wednesday. He sat in his car outside the municipal office for nearly 20 minutes after reading it. Thomas had worked as an inspector for 19 years. He believed in rules. Rules kept exits clear. Rules prevented grease fires. Rules stopped landlords from hiding mold behind paint. But rules were only useful when records told the truth. Thomas opened his inspection notes. His handwritten log showed he visited Bell Street Community Kitchen at 8:51 a.m. on October 14th. The digital system showed 7:30. He remembered the repaired fan. He remembered Patricia holding the confirmation number. Thomas had assumed the discrepancies were clerical errors. 1 error was ordinary. 2 were irritating. 9 businesses within the same redevelopment block were something else. Thomas did not know who had altered processing dates. He did know what he had personally seen. When the subpoena asked for his testimony, Thomas checked the box marked available. Across town, Daniel Carter received a preliminary audit summary. He read it twice. 14 emergency or accelerated compliance actions had been filed in the Bell Street redevelopment zone. 11 showed delayed processing duplicate entries or inconsistent timestamps. Most had been initiated within 90 days of Westbridge's redevelopment application. Daniel sat back. It looked wrong. But looking wrong was not enough. The audit could trigger broader review. It could not win Patricia's hearing for her. Daniel closed the report. On his desk, the $5 boat waited inside glass. "You have to carry yourself this time," he whispered. The night before the hearing, Patricia remained alone in the kitchen. Emily had gone home to sleep. The colored folders were packed inside the canvas bag. Patricia opened a storage cabinet looking for extra printer paper. Behind a stack of old menus sat a blue notebook. Not the current one. An older notebook. Patricia wiped dust from the cover. She sat down. The pages carried a different life. Bus, $22. Rent, short $41. Emily's shoes wait until Friday. Patricia turned another page. November 18th. Her handwriting was smaller then. Borrowed $8. Emily medicine. Patricia stopped. For a moment, the closed kitchen disappeared. She was 36 again. Wet shoes, a sick daughter, a pharmacy counter, a $5 boat in the hands of a frightened boy. Daniel had asked why she would give him her last money. Patricia had never told him what that $5 was for. She touched the faded ink. 12 years later, Daniel Carter had become a judge. He had remembered the boat, but he did not know its price. Patricia closed the notebook and placed it inside her canvas bag. Not as evidence. The $8 had nothing to do with Westbridge. It would not prove a violation. It would not change Judge Susan Whitmore's ruling. Patricia carried it for herself. A reminder. She had faced nights when $5 stood between her child and medicine. She had learned to survive those nights. Tomorrow, lawyers would speak in polished sentences. They would have binders, titles, experience. Patricia would have dates, receipts, photographs, and a delivery driver's GPS log. Small things, little boats. At 11:46 p.m., Patricia turned off the kitchen lights. She stood beside the door and looked back at the tables. "Carry me to morning," she whispered. Then she locked the door. At 9:03 the next morning, Patricia Johnson stood before Judge Susan Whitmore and dropped half her papers on the floor. The sound echoed through hearing room 3. A Westbridge attorney glanced down. Emily closed her eyes. Patricia stared at the scattered pages. "Well," she said quietly, "that's not how I practiced it." Judge Whitmore looked over her glasses. "Miss Johnson, take a moment." "Thank you, Your Honor." Patricia knelt and gathered the papers. The Westbridge attorney did not help. Emily started to stand, but Patricia shook her head. She collected every page herself. When she returned to the table, her hands were trembling. Judge Susan Whitmore noticed. She also noticed Patricia did not hide them. Ready, Patricia inhaled. "Yes, Your Honor." Westbridge was represented by Charles Warren, an attorney with 23 years of municipal and property law experience. His opening statement lasted 9 minutes. He described Bell Street Community Kitchen as a well-intentioned but repeatedly non-compliant food service operation. Patricia heard the phrase well-intentioned 3 times. By the 4th, she understood its purpose. Good woman. Bad operator. Charles presented the storage violation, the ventilation notice, the occupancy question. "Westbridge does not dispute Miss Johnson's charitable intentions," he said, "but public safety cannot depend on good intentions." Patricia wrote the sentence in her notebook. When her turn came, she stood. "Miss Johnson, Judge Whitmore said you may present your response." Patricia looked at the folders, then at the judge. The storage violation was real. Charles Warren looked up. Emily turned sharply toward her mother. Patricia continued, "We had canned goods stored 4 inches below the required clearance. That's my responsibility." Judge Whitmore made a note. "We corrected it within 2 days." Patricia presented a photograph and dated purchase receipt for new shelving brackets. The damaged exit sign was also real. We replaced it. Another receipt. The ventilation system needed work. We sold an industrial mixer to pay for a part of the repair. Charles stood. "Your Honor, the petitioner appears to be confirming the compliance history." Patricia looked at him. "Yes." Charles hesitated. Patricia turned back to Judge Whitmore. "I'm not asking you to pretend I never made mistakes." The courtroom became quiet. "I run a kitchen. Kitchens have problems. Equipment breaks. Shelves get placed wrong. If the law says fix something that keeps people safe, I fix it." Patricia opened the yellow folder. But I am asking the city not to count a repaired problem as unrepaired because someone processed a date late. Judge Whitmore leaned forward. Show me. Patricia did. The first receipt, the October 8th. The photograph. October 11th, the municipal record. October 12th, Patricia explained slowly. Once, Judge Whitmore stopped her. Miss Johnson, answer only the question I asked. Patricia swallowed. Yes, Your Honor. She adjusted. Emily watched her mother learn the room in real time. Charles Warren challenged the photograph. A timestamp does not establish approval. I agree, Patricia said. Charles paused. You agree. It shows the inspector was there after the repair. It doesn't prove he approved it. Judge Whitmore looked at Patricia. Continue. Patricia presented the reinspection confirmation number, then the processing date. Then Thomas Reed was called. Thomas took the oath. Charles questioned him first. Mr. Reed, did Bell Street Community Kitchen have compliance violations? Yes. Multiple yes. Did you personally identify ventilation concerns? Yes. Charles returned to his seat. The answer seemed complete. Then Patricia stood. She had written 17 questions. Emily had told her not to ask all 17. Patricia looked at Thomas. Mr. Reed, when did I request reinspection? Your confirmation number was generated October 10th, and when was it processed October 17th? Did I control that delay? Charles stood. Calls for a conclusion. Sustained, Judge Whitmore said. Patricia nodded. She crossed out the question. What did you personally see when you visited on October 14th? The exhaust system had been partially repaired. What time did you arrive? 8:51. Patricia placed the municipal record on the display. What time does this say Thomas looked? 7:30. Is that accurate? No one word. Small. Heavy. Emily opened the blue folder. Kevin Harris's GPS report showed his delivery van arriving at 8:16. Rachel's photograph showed Thomas inside the kitchen later. The handwritten inspection log showed 8:51. 3 separate records. 1 timeline. Charles Warren attempted to separate each piece. The photograph did not prove approval. The GPS log did not prove inspection. The receipt did not prove municipal acceptance. He was correct. Individually, each document was limited. Patricia listened. Then Judge Whitmore asked Miss Johnson, what exactly are you asking this court to find? Patricia stood. She looked at her notes, then closed the notebook. That the record isn't reliable enough to close us today. Charles shifted. Patricia continued. I'm not asking you to forgive my real violations. Fine me if the law says fine me. Inspect us again. Make me fix what needs fixing. Her voice steadied. But don't turn a mistake I corrected into a mistake I ignored. Judge Whitmore remained still. Patricia looked directly at her. And don't close 60 families out of a kitchen because a computer says 7:30 when the man who was there says 8:51. Silence. Judge Whitmore recessed for 42 minutes. Patricia waited in the hallway. She did not see Daniel standing near the far administrative corridor. He was not part of the hearing. He kept his distance. At 11:38, everyone returned. Judge Whitmore reviewed the record. The court finds sufficient discrepancies to question the reliability of the accelerated closure basis. Patricia stopped breathing. The emergency closure is stayed pending independent inspection and administrative review of assessed penalties. Emily grabbed Patricia's hand beneath the table. This is not a final ruling, Judge Whitmore continued. Patricia nodded. I understand. You have one time, Miss Johnson. Patricia looked at the judge. Sometimes time is enough to do the next thing. Outside the hearing room, Patricia adjusted the canvas bag on her shoulder. Daniel stood near the window. She walked toward him. You carried yourself, he said. Patricia stopped. That was always the point. Daniel lowered his eyes. Then he looked at her again. "When the procedural restrictions allow it, there's something I'd like to show you." Patricia studied him. What Daniel glanced toward his office, a boat. For the first time in 12 years, Patricia Johnson understood that Daniel Carter had never forgotten Booth 6. 3 weeks passed before Daniel Carter contacted Patricia Johnson. Not personally. A courthouse administrator called Bell Street Community Kitchen and asked whether Patricia would be available for a brief meeting in a public conference area after the independent inspection record had been filed. Patricia almost laughed at the formality. "Tell Judge Carter I know how to sit at a table." Emily, standing beside her, whispered, "Mom, what, he's a judge." He used to wipe menus for grilled cheese. Emily covered her mouth to hide a smile. The meeting took place at 4:30 on a Thursday afternoon. Daniel was already seated when Patricia and Emily arrived. He was not wearing his robe. Without it, Patricia could see more clearly the boy she remembered. Not in his height, not in the shape of his face, in the way his right thumb rubbed the side of his index finger when he was nervous. Daniel had done the same thing at booth 6. A small glass box rested on the table. Patricia stopped. Emily whispered, "Is that it?" Daniel stood. "Yes." He opened the box carefully. Inside was the $5 bill. Still folded. Still a boat. The paper had faded slightly. Abraham Lincoln's face was hidden beneath the old creases. Emily moved closer. "I folded that." Daniel looked at her. "You're Emily." She nodded. "The boat expert." Emily laughed softly. "I was 9. You had a philosophy at 9. Patricia sat down. "You kept $5 for 12 years, Daniel lifted the boat." "Yes, I gave it to you to use." "I did." Patricia pointed at the folded bill. "No, you preserved it like a museum exhibit." Daniel smiled. Then the smile disappeared. "I used it, Patricia." The room became quiet. Daniel placed the boat between them. "At 16, I almost dropped out of school." Patricia listened. "I'd been suspended again. I thought everybody had already decided what I was." Daniel looked at the boat. "I opened the tin where I kept this. A tin peppermint candy box." Patricia nodded. Very dignified. Daniel smiled again. "I remembered the diner." He told her about the fights, the stolen headphones, Margaret making him return them, the packed backpack beneath his bed. Emily leaned forward. "You kept a bag packed for years." Why, Daniel looked at her. Because leaving first hurts less than being told to leave. Patricia's expression changed. Daniel continued. "That night at Bell Street, I had already decided adults asked questions to find out what punishment you deserved." He looked at Patricia. "But you didn't ask what I did. I asked where your father was. You asked if anybody knew where I was." Patricia remembered. Daniel's voice lowered. "Do you understand how different those questions are to a kid like me?" Patricia did not answer. "You noticed I was missing before you asked whether I was guilty." Emily looked down. Daniel touched the boat. "So, when I wanted to quit school, I looked at this." He told them about community college, Margaret's landlord notice, the legal aid volunteer, law school, municipal legal services. Every time I thought systems were too big, I remembered a waitress with $5. Patricia shook her head. "Daniel, don't make me into something I'm not. I'm not. You are." Patricia leaned closer. "I was tired, broke. My shoe was falling apart. I remember the shoe." "You remember my shoe." It squeaked. Emily laughed. Patricia looked offended. It was raining. It squeaked before the rain. "Traitor." For a moment, all three laughed. Then Daniel became quiet. There's something I never told you." Patricia waited. "The diner wasn't where I was going." "Where were you going? The freight yard?" Patricia's smile disappeared. Daniel stared at the table. "I'd heard older kids talk about freight trains." I thought I could get on one. You were 10. I know, you could have been killed. I know. Daniel's voice was calm now, too calm. If Frank had made me leave, I was going there. Patricia looked at the boat. The room seemed colder. Daniel continued. When you asked me not to disappear into the rain, I thought you were being dramatic. Patricia closed her eyes briefly. I wasn't dramatic enough. No. Daniel looked at her. You got me to mourning. The words struck Patricia harder than she expected. Emily reached for her mother's hand. Patricia remained silent. Then she opened her canvas bag. The old blue notebook was inside. She had carried it since the hearing. Patricia opened to November 18th. She turned the notebook toward Daniel. Borrowed $8. Emily medicine. Daniel read the line. What is this? Patricia looked at Emily. You had a fever. Emily nodded. Daniel looked back at Patricia. The $5. I was going to buy medicine. Daniel's face emptied. You gave me your daughter's medicine money. I gave you $5. Patricia, you needed help. So did Emily. She had me. Daniel stood and walked toward the window. For 12 years he had believed he understood the boat. He had been wrong. I thought you gave me what you could spare. Patricia shook her head. Kindness isn't always spare change. Daniel turned. I owe you. No, yes, you don't. My entire life, stop. Patricia's voice filled the small room. Daniel fell silent. If you owe me, then I failed. He stared at her. I didn't give you $5 so you'd spend 12 years building a debt. Then what am I supposed to do with this? Daniel pointed at the boat. Patricia looked at it. She remembered Emily's fever, Helen's $8, Sunday soup, 60 families. Then Patricia smiled. Pass it on. Daniel looked down at the $5 boat. For 12 years he had protected it behind tin and glass. For the first time he wondered whether keeping it had never been the final purpose. Maybe boats were not made to stay on shelves. Maybe they were supposed to carry someone and then return for the next person. The independent inspector arrived at Bell Street Community Kitchen on a Monday morning carrying a flashlight, a tablet, and no interest in Patricia Johnson's story. Patricia liked him immediately. His name was Harold Green. He did not ask about Daniel Carter. He did not ask how many families ate at the kitchen. He did not admire the painted walls or the handwritten thank you cards near the refrigerator. He checked the ventilation system, measured shelf clearance, tested the rear exit, examined electrical outlets. At 10:42, Harold stood beneath the emergency light and pointed upward. That sign needs replacing. Patricia wrote it down. How long do I have? We're not discussing deadlines yet. I'm discussing deadlines. Harold looked at her. Then he smiled slightly. Write down 30 days. Patricia did. The inspection lasted 3 hours and 17 minutes. The final report was not perfect. The ventilation system required an upgrade. 2 storage racks needed repositioning. The rear exit sign had to be replaced. A section of damaged flooring near the preparation sink required repair. But the final conclusion contained the sentence Patricia had been waiting for. No immediate condition presently supports emergency closure as a necessary public safety measure. Patricia read it twice, then a third time. Emily hugged her. Patricia hugged her back for exactly 5 seconds. We still have 4 violations, Mom. I'm happy responsibly. The city audit moved more slowly. Daniel had no role in deciding Patricia's case. He remained recused. Judge Susan Whitmore reviewed the independent inspection and the developing administrative record. Meanwhile, auditors examined 14 businesses in the Bell Street redevelopment zone. 11 files contained inconsistent processing dates. 7 had duplicate entries. 5 businesses had received accelerated compliance notices shortly before Westbridge submitted its redevelopment application. No single email said remove these people. There was no secret meeting recorded on a phone, but the pattern was enough to trigger a broader municipal investigation. Westbridge Development Group faced administrative sanctions and civil challenges from several tenants. Patricia did not celebrate. Why not, Emily asked. Because an investigation isn't a conviction. You've been reading too much legal language. I know, it's ruining my personality. Judge Whitmore issued her decision 6 weeks after the original hearing. Bell Street Community Kitchen could reopen conditionally. Patricia had 90 days to complete the required upgrades. 90 days. The ventilation estimate alone was $6,200. The flooring repair added another $1,700. The exit sign was cheap. Patricia circled that one. I can afford the sign. Emily stared at her. Wonderful. Oh, we'll reopen as a beautiful exit sign. Patricia closed the report. Daniel heard about the ruling through the public administrative record. He wanted to help. The old instinct was immediate. Write a check, find a donor, call someone powerful. Then he remembered Patricia's words, "If you owe me, then I failed." Daniel understood. Patricia did not need a rescue hidden inside gratitude. She needed access to the same tools other organizations should have. Daniel spoke with the administrative court director and the city's small organization compliance office. What happens to groups that survive an emergency closure appeal, he asked. They complete remediation. With what money? The official shrugged. Grants, loans, donations. How do they find those? Another shrug. Daniel had seen that shrug before. Systems aren't always written for the people most affected by them. Within 3 weeks, the city announced a public compliance workshop for small organizations facing municipal remediation requirements. It was open to every affected business and nonprofit in the district. Patricia received the notice by email. She printed it. The printer jammed. Of course, she said. At the workshop, Patricia sat in the 3rd row. Daniel was not there. That mattered. Nobody could say the program existed to hand Patricia a private favor. A grant specialist explained matching funds. A compliance officer explained remediation plans. Patricia raised her hand 11 times. Emily counted. "You're embarrassing me," she whispered. "Good. Builds character." Emily looked at her. Did Margaret teach Daniel that Patricia smiled? Their first grant application was rejected. Incomplete project timeline. Patricia stared at the email. I included a timeline. You wrote as fast as humanly possible, Emily said. That is a timeline. No, Mom, they rewrote it. The second application returned with questions about operational sustainability. Patricia became angry. We've operated for 4 years. They want numbers. I have numbers. You have numbers in 6 notebooks. Experience numbers. Emily created spreadsheets. Patricia complained. Then she spent 4 nights entering records. Meals served. Volunteer hours. Ingredient costs. Donations. Payments. For the first time, Patricia saw Bell Street Community Kitchen as data. 63 families served in 1 week. 14 elderly residents receiving deliveries. 31 volunteers. More than 12,000 meals in a year. Patricia sat silently before the laptop. I didn't know it was that much. Emily looked at her mother. You were busy doing it. The third application was approved, a matching grant. The city would fund half the remediation cost if the kitchen raised the remaining amount. Patricia had 37 days. George organized repair weekends. Rachel created a community fundraiser. Kevin convinced 3 delivery companies to donate a day's fuel reimbursement. Helen Parker placed $20 in a jar. Patricia tried to return it. Helen slapped her hand. I peeled carrots with arthritis for this kitchen. Don't insult me now. The matching amount grew. $500, $2,000, $4,000. On day 73, they reached the target. Repairs began. Patricia worked beside contractors. She swept dust, carried boxes, checked receipts. The ventilation system was replaced. The flooring came up. The new exit sign glowed red above the rear door. On day 73 of the 90-day period, Patricia stood in the center of the unfinished kitchen. Emily checked the calendar. 17 days. George looked at the exposed floor. Plenty of time. Patricia stared at him. You are a terrible liar. George smiled. Outside evening settled over Bell Street. Inside, drills started again. Patricia opened her blue notebook. She did not write, "How do I fight?" That page belonged to an earlier version of herself. On a clean page, she wrote 17 days. Then beneath it, "Keep going." The law had not saved Patricia. Daniel had not saved Patricia. A grant had not saved Patricia. Each had only carried her across one stretch of water. Now, with 17 days remaining, Patricia Johnson still had to row. On the 87th day, Patricia Johnson unlocked the front door of Bell Street Community Kitchen at 5:42 in the morning. For several seconds, she did not turn on the lights. She stood in the darkness and listened. The new ventilation system hummed softly above the kitchen. The repaired floor no longer dipped near the preparation sink. A red exit sign glowed over the rear door. Patricia looked at it. Still ugly, she whispered. Then she smiled. They had finished 3 days early. By 7, George Bennett arrived carrying a toolbox. "You're already here, I own a key." That wasn't my question. Rachel Moore came next with 2 trays of cornbread. Kevin Harris delivered canned tomatoes and claimed he had accidentally ordered too many. Patricia did not believe him. She accepted the tomatoes. At 8:30, Emily walked through the door carrying a cardboard box filled with colored paper. Patricia looked inside. "No, you don't even know what it is. Paper boats." Emily smiled. Paper boats. The reopening was scheduled for noon. By 11:15, a line had formed outside. Patricia stood behind the counter wearing a clean apron. Above her, the old painted words remained. "Pay what you can. Work if you can." During the closure, Patricia had added something new. Near the front window stood a long wooden table, 6 chairs, a lamp, a basket of napkins. No sign explained the table. Emily had asked whether they should label it. No. How will people know who it's for? They don't need to. The table was for teenagers and young adults who needed somewhere safe to sit in the evening. Patricia refused to call it a homeless youth table. She did not want anyone to enter the kitchen and announce their pain before earning a chair. If they were hungry, they could eat. If they had no money and felt able to help, Patricia found them work. Fold napkins, stack cans, wipe menus. The rules were familiar. At noon, Patricia opened the doors. People entered. Soup filled bowls. Children argued over cornbread. George complained that someone had moved his tools. Helen Parker sat near the counter giving instructions nobody had requested. The kitchen was alive again. At 12:37, Daniel Carter arrived. He wore jeans, a gray sweater, and no robe. Patricia saw him enter. Judge Carter. Daniel looked around. "I was told this place doesn't require people to explain themselves before eating." "Correct. Then I'm hungry. Line starts there." Daniel joined the line. When he reached the counter, Patricia handed him a bowl of chicken soup. "How much suggested price is $6. Daniel placed a 20 on the counter. Patricia pushed $14 back. "I can donate. Donation jar is by the door." Daniel laughed. He took the change. "You really make everything difficult, I've been told." A silver-haired woman entered behind him. Daniel turned. Margaret. Patricia froze. Margaret Wilson walked slowly now. She used a cane, though she seemed annoyed by it. Daniel brought her forward. Patricia Johnson, this is Margaret Wilson. For a moment, the two women simply looked at each other. You came at 11:47, Patricia said. Margaret smiled. You remember the time I missed my bus at 11:52? Margaret's smile disappeared. I never knew. Daniel didn't either. Margaret reached for Patricia's hand. Thank you. Patricia shook her head. You stayed. You stayed with him. I gave him one night. Margaret looked toward Daniel. Sometimes one person keeps a child safe through one night, so the next person gets a chance to keep him through years. Daniel lowered his eyes. Patricia squeezed Margaret's hand. Neither woman said anything else. They did not need to. At the children's table, Emily opened her box. Who wants to learn how to fold a boat? 6 hands rose. Within 20 minutes, paper boats covered the table. Crooked boats. Tiny boats. One boat that looked more like a damaged hat. Patricia laughed. Then she noticed the boy near the door. He had entered alone. 15, maybe 16. Black hoodie, wet shoulders. He sat at the new evening table even though it was barely afternoon. No food, no drink. His eyes moved repeatedly toward the window. Patricia stopped. Something old moved inside her. She looked down. The boy's right shoe was tied. The left lace had snapped near the middle and been knotted together. Patricia heard Bell Street Diner again. Rain against glass. Frank counting the register. A child saying, "My dad's coming." Daniel stood near the counter. He followed Patricia's gaze. The boy saw them looking. His shoulders tightened. Patricia immediately turned away. She picked up a clean napkin, then another. She walked toward the long wooden table. The boy watched her approach. Patricia did not stand over him. She pulled out the chair opposite his and sat. Hi. The boy said nothing. I'm Patricia. His eyes flicked toward her apron. I know, Patricia smiled. Means you can read. We've established something. Across the room, Daniel stopped breathing. The boy looked toward the door. Patricia kept both hands on the table. You hungry? No. She nodded. All right. The boy seemed surprised. Patricia began folding the napkin. Not well. Emily had always been better at boats. After several seconds, the boy spoke. My name's Marcus. Marcus. What? He hesitated. Hill. All right, Marcus Hill. Patricia looked at his wet hoodie, then at his hands. She remembered a 10-year-old boy who had believed every question was an accusation. So Patricia did not ask what Marcus had done. She did not ask why he was alone. She did not ask whether he had caused trouble. She asked the question Daniel Carter had carried for 12 years. Are you cold? At the counter, Daniel closed his eyes. The circle had found its beginning again. Marcus Hill looked at Patricia Johnson as if the question had been asked in the wrong language. Am I what cold? His eyes moved toward the window. No. Patricia nodded. All right. She continued folding the napkin. It was becoming a terrible boat. Marcus watched her fingers. You're doing that wrong. Patricia looked offended. I run this building. That doesn't make you good at paper. Across the room, Emily laughed. Patricia pointed at her daughter. Apparently, disrespect is free here. Marcus smiled before he could stop himself. Patricia placed the crooked napkin boat between them. You hungry? No, his stomach answered. Marcus looked down. Patricia did not smile. Good, she said, because I need someone to stack cans. Marcus frowned. What storage room? 3 shelves, tomato cans on the left, beans on the right. You want me to work, I want my cans stacked. For food, if you need food. Marcus looked toward the counter. Daniel stood beside Margaret, watching without appearing to watch. Marcus lowered his voice. I don't have money. Patricia leaned closer. Then, it's fortunate the cans don't charge. 10 minutes later, Marcus was in the storage room. He stacked every can with the labels facing forward. Daniel noticed, so did Patricia. When Marcus finished, Patricia placed chicken soup and cornbread in front of him. He ate slowly at first, then faster. Slow down, Patricia said. I'm eating normal. Daniel looked at Patricia. Patricia looked at Daniel. Neither spoke. Some sentences did not need 12 years to travel across a room. After the second bowl, Marcus stopped pretending. My aunt kicked me out. Patricia sat opposite him. When yesterday. Where did you sleep? Marcus stared at the soup. Bus station. Emily stopped folding paper. Patricia's voice remained calm. Does anybody know where you are? Marcus looked up. Daniel turned away for a moment. The question still had power. My school thinks I'm sick. Parents. My mom's in Arizona. I don't know where my dad is. Your Aunt Marcus laughed bitterly. She said, don't come back. Patricia did not promise him a bedroom. She did not say everything would be fine. Promises made too quickly could become another kind of cruelty. Instead, Patricia reached for the kitchen phone. There is a youth crisis team I trust. Marcus stood. No. Patricia put the phone down. I won't call behind your back. They'll put me somewhere, maybe. I'll leave, you can. Marcus stared at her. Patricia kept her hands visible. But if you leave, I'm going to worry. Why? Because it's cold. That isn't your problem. Patricia smiled sadly. 12 years ago, somebody told me the same thing without using those exact words. Daniel lowered his head. Patricia turned the phone toward Marcus. You can listen while I call. If you don't like what they're saying, you tell me. Marcus remained standing. After a long silence, he sat. The call lasted 23 minutes. A crisis counselor agreed to come to the kitchen. Marcus would not be forced back to his aunt's home that night. There would be an assessment, questions, paperwork, nothing magical. But he would not sleep at the bus station. When Patricia hung up, Marcus rubbed both hands across his face. What now? Now you wait. I hate waiting, so do I. Patricia stood, stacked more cans. Marcus laughed. Emily reached into the tip jar. She pulled out a $5 bill. Patricia saw her. No. Emily paused. What not the tip jar? Patricia reached into her own wallet. She removed a $5 bill. For a second, she simply held it. 12 years earlier, $5 had been medicine. Bus fare, a decision she could not afford. Now, Patricia still counted every dollar. She still wrote expenses in blue notebooks. But tonight, Emily was healthy. The kitchen was open. Patricia did not have to choose between her child and someone else's. The money felt different. The choice did not. Patricia handed the bill to Emily. Emily smiled. Her fingers remembered. One fold, then another, a small paper boat appeared. Emily placed it in Patricia's palm. Patricia returned to Marcus. She set the boat on the table. Marcus stared. What's that $5? I can see that. Good. We've confirmed reading twice today. Why is it a boat? Patricia looked towards Daniel. He stood near the counter. The old glass box was in his hands. Because tonight Patricia said somebody has to notice you. Marcus touched the boat. Daniel opened the glass box. He removed the old $5 bill. The paper felt fragile. For 12 years, Daniel had protected it from water sunlight and careless hands. He walked to a small shelf near the kitchen entrance. Patricia watched him. What are you doing? Passing it on. Daniel placed the old boat on the shelf. No glass, Emily asked. Daniel shook his head. Boats aren't supposed to live in boxes. Patricia smiled. Emily found a piece of cardboard and a black marker. She wrote 7 words. A little boat can still carry somebody. She placed the sign beneath the old $5 boat. Daniel looked around the kitchen. There was no plaque with his name. No photograph of Judge Carter. No story describing how a waitress had saved him, because Patricia had never saved Daniel's entire life. Margaret had stayed. Teachers had challenged him. A legal aid volunteer had explained a notice. Daniel had studied, failed, returned, worked, chosen. Patricia had done one thing. She had helped a frightened 10-year-old survive one night long enough to reach the next person. Near the door, the youth crisis counselor arrived. Marcus stood. He slipped the new $5 boat into his hoodie pocket. "Do I have to give this back?" Patricia shook her head. "No. What do I do with it?" Patricia looked at Daniel. Daniel smiled. "You'll know when somebody needs a boat." Marcus followed the counselor toward a quiet table. Outside evening settled over Bell Street. On the shelf rested an old $5 boat that had traveled 12 years. In a teenager's pocket rested another. One journey had ended. Another had just begun. Sometimes kindness does not change a life in one dramatic moment. It does not erase poverty, repair a broken system, or guarantee that tomorrow will be easy. Sometimes kindness simply helps a person reach morning. Patricia's $5 did not make Daniel a judge. Daniel still had to return to school, face his anger work, exhausting jobs, study law, and choose again and again not to become the person others expected him to be. But on one cold night, Patricia gave him something more important than money. She gave him evidence that he was worth noticing. And years later, Daniel understood that gratitude was not permission to bend justice for the woman who once helped him. The highest way he could honor Patricia was to protect a process fair enough for her to stand on her own evidence, speak in her own voice, and carry herself. Maybe someone once gave you a small kindness you never forgot. A meal, a ride, a phone call. $5 when $5 meant everything. If so, tell us about it in the comments. Your story may remind someone that small acts are never always small. Share this story with a person who needs a little hope tonight. And if you believe ordinary people can still change lives by simply noticing one another, you're always welcome to subscribe and stay with us for the next story.